Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 19th of June of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, where during the previous 24 hours, more precisely during the previous 48 hours, the Ukrainians made at least 3 attempts to attack the capital of the Russian Federation, the city of Moscow. Lots of videos were published during this period of time. The Ukrainians launched thousands of drones in the direction of the capital of the Russian Federation, and during the first wave of attack, the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage to the Moscow's oil refinery. And all these videos are about this, about the damage that the Ukrainians managed to deal to this object of energy infrastructure. Another important thing is that as a result of the first wave of attack, the Ukrainians managed to receive promises and probably obligations from the Western countries to provide a lot of weapons. Netherlands announced additional 500 million euro military package. Belgium promised to deliver additional F-16 fighter jets. The United Kingdom promised to provide 150,000 drones to Ukraine. For example, Australia promised additional 100 million in military package. Germany promised to provide additional air defense systems, and Swedish promised to provide additional weapons, and so on. So billions of dollars were promised to provide to Ukraine as a result of the first wave attack. And during the late evening of the 18th of June of 2026, the Ukrainians launched another wave of attack, and the sources reported that the Ukrainians used 300 of drones to attack the theater of Russia. But as for the second wave of attack, the Russians, according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, managed to destroy everything. Every single drone flying in the direction of the capital of the Russian Federation was destroyed. During the 19th of June of 2026, the Ukrainians launched the third wave of attack, and the sources reported about hundreds of drones flying once again in the direction of the capital of the Russian Federation. More precisely, pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Ukrainians launched 320 drones in the direction of the capital of Russia, and during the 19th of June of 2026 we start receiving first videos on this matter. We have drones, hundreds of drones flying in the direction of the capital of the Russian Federation. The videos were published by pro-Russian sources, by locals. During the 19th of June of 2026, we start receiving first updates on this matter, and we start receiving a lot of updates of how the Russians began destroying drones of the armed forces of Ukraine. And according to information we have, as for the third wave of attack, the Russians once again managed to destroy every single drone that was approaching the city of Moscow. So summarizing everything, between the 18th and the 19th of June of 2026, the Ukrainians used thousands of drones. There were 3 waves of attack, but only the first one was successful. The second and the third waves of attack were repelled by Russians. At the same time, we see that the Russians are keeping something like a pause. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians used just 100 of drones to attack the theater of Ukraine, so nothing special. But at the same time, we received lots of reports that everything is ready for the next massive attack. The sources reported that, according to available information, at least 4 Tu-95 MS strategic bombers equipped with cruise missiles are ready for deployment, which means that either between the 19th and the 20th of June of 2026 or between the 20th and the 21st of June of 2026, most likely the Russians will carry out another massive attack through the entire theater of Ukraine using hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. And most likely, once again, the Russians are going to attack the city of Kiev and the Kiev region. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very important updates. And first, let's talk about the Slaviansk-Konstantinovka agglomeration, where the Russians managed to improve their positions almost through every single direction. According to information we have, the Russians improved their positions once again through the city of Konstantinovka. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. So this is the end of the 17th of June of 2026. This is is the end of the 18th of June, and this is the end of the 19th of June of 2026. The Russians, as you can see, captured the southern, the central, western, and the eastern parts of the city of Konstantinovka, and today pro-Russian sources published another video on this matter, and here we can see dozens of flags, of Russian flags, that were raised through the settlement of Konstantinovka, mainly through the eastern and the northeastern parts of the settlement. So all these flags were raised through the central market microdistrict and through the southern part of the Chervony microdistrict. According to this configuration of the front line, the Ukrainians still control the northern parts of the Novoselovka microdistrict and the Chervony microdistrict, but the Russians continue offensive operation, and most likely in coming 2-3 days the Ukrainians would be forced to abandon their positions towards the settlements of Alexeyevo-Drushkovka. Furthermore, the Russians began offensive operation between the settlements of Sofievka and Konstantinovka in the northern direction with the purpose to attack the settlement of Nikopol. Now the Russians are tasked not just to continue offensive operation towards the settlement of Drushkovka, but to maintain the line. So now the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over every single square kilometer along this red line, which means that we're talking about the cities like Konstantinovka, Nikopol, Podolska, Chervona, Stenki, and Verolubovka. So most likely these are the next targets of Russians on the way towards the settlement of Drushkovka. Meanwhile, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the settlement of Drushkovka using significant number of bombs. The Russians use aviation, FABs of different calibers. Basically, the Russians began reducing the settlement of Drushkovka to ruins with the purpose to soften the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine before the beginning of the major battle for the settlement, which most likely is going to start within the next several weeks. As for the eastern Kramatorsk-Slavian directions, as you can see during the previous 24 hours, the biggest number of updates are coming right exactly through this area, and during the previous 24 hours, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Yurkovka. And as for the eastern Kramatorsk direction, it seems that the front line, more precisely the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine through this area, have collapsed completely, because just during the previous 2 days, the Russians reported that they managed to capture 2 towns in this area. First, the Russians captured the settlement of Rai-Alexandrovka. This information was published yesterday by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and a video on this matter was published. Here we can see dozens of flags of Russians that were raised through the settlement, and today the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the group of forces south reported that the Russians captured another village in this area, the village of Yurkovka, and this is the video that was published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and here we can see at least 3 flags that were raised by Russians through the settlement. According to this video, the Russians raised a flag in the northern parts, in the central part, and in the southern parts of the settlement. Furthermore, as you can see, this is not just another village in the Slaviansk-Kramatorsk direction. This is the village that is located on the Ukrainian side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, which means that the Russians continue improving their positions right in front of the city of Kramatorsk on the Ukrainian side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, which means that in coming days the Russians will continue their broad frontline attack from the settlements of Pereut towards the city of Lyman. So the Russians currently use dozens of roads to attack, and the most important thing is that if the Ukrainians want to repel every single road of attack, they need to do just one thing. They need to introduce additional forces on the territory of the city of Slaviansk. But the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, understands, and he believes that if he introduced too many forces in this agglomeration, then most likely he will never be able to take these forces back on the territory of the mainland. And furthermore, when talking about this agglomeration, if this agglomeration falls, then we won't see any single, even a single big city like Kramatorsk or Slaviansk, almost till the settlement of Lazova or till the settlement of Pavlograd. So the distance between the Konstantinovka, Kramatorsk, Slaviansk agglomeration and the next more or less big town or city is around 100 kilometers. So all these 100 kilometers is just small villages that most likely the Russians would be able to capture very, very fast one by one. Now let's move further and let's talk about the northern Slaviansk direction. As we discussed during the previous video, the defenses of the city of Lyman have collapsed as well. During the previous 24 hours, pro-Russian sources published another video where we can see a lot of episodes of how Russians were moving through different parts of the city of Lyman and how the Russians were raising their flags through the settlement. As of the previous 24 hours, the Russians, as you can see, raised 2 flags in the central part, and the Russians raised 2 flags in the southern parts of the settlement. As for the previous day, the Russians raised flags mainly in the central and the southeastern parts of the city. The Russians continue offensive operation. According to this configuration of the front line, the Ukrainians controls just the most western parts of the settlements, just with one purpose: to save control over the main evacuation roads that go in the direction of the settlement of Mayaki and the settlement of Rai-Alexandrovka. But the main problem for the Ukrainians right now is that the Russians have already established complete FPV drone control over the territory and artillery and aviation control. For example, in this video we can see how the Russians were attacking the main evacuation roads and main evacuation positions along the river of Seversky Donetsk with FPV drones, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to escape this cauldron. In the area of the settlement of Mayaki, we have a video where the Russians were bombing positions and evacuation roads of the armored forces of Ukraine with FAB 3000, which means that all these roads under complete control. It is very difficult for the Ukrainians right now to evacuate their contingent on the territory of the Russian side of the river of Seversky Donetsk. And when the city of Lyman falls, and this is going to happen not within a month or within years, this is going to happen within days, the Russians will continue offensive operation, and most likely we must wait for the river crossing operation. The Russians most likely would try to cross the river of Seversky Donetsk between the villages of Svetogorsk, Badgorodichne, Tatianovka and Prishep. And the Russians most likely in coming days and coming months during the summer military campaign would try to establish complete control over these territories. These 3 biggest forests between the city of Izum and the city of Lyman, with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Slaviansk and the entire Slaviansk Konstantinovka agglomeration from the north and from the northwest. At the same time, these 3 forests would be used by Russians as a perfect and natural protection against the Ukrainian drones, because it is very difficult to attack any position through any forest, and the Russians started using this advantageous situation just in 2025. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation through the Dnipro-Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians intensified their drones and aviation activities. The Russians established complete fire control over the Dnipro-Nikopol line, Air-73. In this video, we can see a lot of vehicles that were destroyed by Russians as a result of drone strikes. We can see civilians that were moving through this territory and how they were filming the situation in this region. Just through this video, we can see at least 2, 3 or even 4 vehicles that belong to the armored forces of Ukraine that were destroyed. Furthermore, the Russians attacked a gas station along this line, and as a result of attack, this gas station was also destroyed. The Russians destroyed another gas station and another parking site of the fuel trucks in the area of the settlement of in the area of Odessa and the more southwestern parts. And in this video, we can see another gas station and another site that was destroyed by Russians as a result of attack. It seems that in coming days, the Ukrainians will also start suffering huge problems with fuel and fuel shortage. Furthermore, the Russians during the previous overnight massive attack attacked and destroyed the Sumy logistic hub. This is the Nova Poshta terminal that was attacked by the Russians with drones. As a result of attack, a fire broke out and the Ukrainians were trying to stabilize the situation and to extinguish the fire. So the summer military campaign intensifies not just through the Slaviansk Kramatorsk agglomeration. We received reports about additional evacuation through the Dnipro direction. The Ukrainians tried to bring and introduce fresh forces with the purpose to stabilize the front line, but the Russians basically destroy every single building in this area with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to accumulate additional forces. The Russians intensified their attacks through the Kharkiv region As for the most northern Kharkiv direction, explosions and attacks from the Russian side were recorded through the settlement of Kazachia-Lopань. In this video, we can see a temporary deployment point that was destroyed. In the southwestern direction, the Russians destroyed the energy substation. As a result of attack, the substation was destroyed, which means that this most northern direction of the Kharkiv region currently has no electricity and energy for equipment, which means that it will intensify the Russian developments on the ground, and the Russians continue reducing to ruins the most northwestern parts of the city that the Ukrainians use for logistic purposes to supply and support the contingent through the settlements of Zolotov and Kazachia-Lopань. The Russian offensive operation intensifies, and we expect the beginning of another massive attack from the Russian side. Another important update, another important escalation we can see between the Republic of Belarus and Ukraine. So something very bad might happen in this area in coming days or weeks. I would like to remind you that several days ago, the Ukrainian drone attacked a bus along A240 road between the cities of Gomel and Bryansk. And as a result of that attack, casualties among civilians were recorded, mainly among the people of the Republic of Belarus. The Belarusians investigated this situation, and today the Belarusian authorities made a statement. After the Ukrainian armed forces attack on a bus with children in the Bryansk region, Belarus reserves the right to take action against Ukraine to protect the lives of its citizens. This was stated by the permanent representative of Belarus in the Sea Statutory and other bodies. Another important thing, that right after the Belarusians made this statement, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, issued an ultimatum to the Republic of Belarus. The president of Ukraine stated that he gives 10 days to the Belarusian authorities, military authorities, to remove forces from the border between the Republic of Belarus and Ukraine. And if Belarus doesn't remove their forces from the territory along the border, then Ukrainians, Zelensky promised to do this by himself. So which means that in 10 days another escalation might happen between the Republic of Belarus and Ukraine. I would like to remind you that according to Zelensky, Belarus used this territory to coordinate drones to attack the territory of Ukraine in the northwestern part. So basically Zelensky doesn't have any other option. He wants to force the Belarusians to move forces further in the northern direction, and if it happens, of course, the effectiveness of Russia's strikes through this territory would reduce significantly. But if it doesn't happen, then the Ukrainians, according to Zelensky, would do this by themselves, which means that he threatened to attack vehicles and equipment of the Republic of Belarus through the southern region if the Belarusians don't remove their forces from this area. Which means that in coming 10 days, another round of escalation might happen. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.